So joining us now from Montgomery, Alabama, is Dr. Allen Mendenhall. He's Associate Dean of the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. And, he knows this world. So if you were a CEO of any major corporation, how would you handle, the social media trumped up controversies? You stay away, you embrace it like A&W root beer. What do you do?
Well, I think actually one of the big problems is that these boards of directors are getting pressure from asset management firms and other institutional investors that are actually pushing corporations to the left. And a lot of CEOs are just at companies for a short amount of time. So say you're just going in there for 4 or 5 years and you're going to be out looking for the next thing. Well, you can make all kinds of decisions that actually aren't that profitable for your company. In fact, the entire shift from shareholder primacy to the stakeholder model is predicated on this idea that maximizing profits for shareholders is an old-fashioned way of doing business, and that we need to redefine business to account for the interest of all kinds of stakeholders. Well, stakeholders is a vague term that can be defined in any way. So a CEO could come in and say, look, we need to do X, Y, and Z because all these stakeholders may be affected by climate change or some sort of environmental issue. And then you can institute policies and procedures that may make yourself more palatable to the media, that may make your company look suitably leftist.
But that's what happened at Disney, right? That's what Disney did.
So it's happened so many times. And in fact,
but
the most recent...
that's the poster boy for a lesson at Troy University. I mean, you got Disney, which markets to every American who has children, all right? And then all of a sudden, it's pushing a very controversial public school issue about indoctrinating children into subjects they can't possibly understand. Disney says that's good. That's the don't say gay thing. And in doing so, Disney harmed its brand beyond redemption, for at least in the short term. And they got Chapek, the CEO, fired for doing it. But you would think that if Chapek was a good businessman, he would know just what you stated, Dean, that, hey, if you're going to take a political stance, you're going to alienate somebody, right?
That's exactly right. And you'll find that you have to imagine this situation. Let's just say half of America is conservative and half of America is on the political left or progressive. Well, you would know that wading into politics is going to alienate a certain number of people, a certain fraction of the U.S. population. Well, why would any companies do this? Well, it's because we're starting to have financial and institutional incentives that are trying to push companies to the left. And my biggest example of that is just this ESG movement, the environmental, social, and governance movement, which of course can mean two things. In one sense, it's just a framework or strategy that individual corporations undertake internally. But more broadly, it is the non-financial standards, metrics, and factors that asset management firms, financial institutions, and institutional investors consider when they allocate capital or assess risk. Now, these factors are pushing companies to the left. And you see institutional investors, the big three are BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. They hold over 20% of the equity of S&P 500 companies. And now we have, trading is very different. 100 years ago, buying stocks and things like that was just becoming widespread. It was only in the 80s and 90s that we started having 401ks and those types of things. Now institutional investors have gotten huge. They hold around 80%.
So institutional investors that buy a lot of stock, okay?
Yes.
In their funds, they are telling CEOs, hey, you better embrace climate change or we're not going to buy your stock?
Well, here's what happened just yesterday, Bill. Just yesterday, Newsmax was yanked from DirecTV. So AT&T owns roughly 70% of the shares of DirecTV. But you have a small hedge fund that is an activist investor. They're called activist investors. And their job is to go out and buy as many shares in publicly traded companies as they can and deliberately push these companies politically to the left.
By threats? Is that how they push them, by
by
threatening
threats.
them?
So
By
they
saying we're going to
they
dump your stock unless you dump Newsmax? Is that what's
yeah
happening?
they have shareholder proposals that they issue. They write reports. They go to the media, and they vote. They exercise their proxy voting power. So all these thousands and thousands of beneficiaries of these funds, they're the intermediaries, and
Wow.
those people, there's actually a breach of fiduciary duty that's going on because as
And they're
institutional
manipulating the
investors,
markets. They're
they're manipulating the
manipulating the
market.
markets for political gain. I mean, that should be
That's
an
right.
SEC concern,
Well,
Securities and
it is.
Exchange Commission.
In fact, the SEC is actually, because of this, considering some proposed regulations that would force companies to disclose ESG factors. But we know that right now, the way these investments are being done, they violate federal case precedent. They violate Delaware law, where a lot of these companies are incorporated, which places a huge
Right.
emphasis on shareholder primacy, and they violate the Employment Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, because a lot of this money that's being invested comes from state pension money.
Well, it's
And
got to be. They've got to litigate it then. And I know this Newsmax
I agree.
thing is in Congress now. We'll see how it goes. Dean, very enlightening. Thank you very much for helping us out. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for
Okay.
having me on.